Alrighty, everybody, let's go. So today I want to pick up Jason Bashir's from Archaix and the end of his latest video. So I've gone through some of Archaix's material, and he calls himself a chronologist. So basically, bringing the world events of history and ancient history into a timeline, looking at all the data sets. He spent about 20 years going through bibliographies and reading books, and he's written many books himself. There's a background to all of that, but I think that he's providing something useful. I would also say that I'm not really on board with the conclusions where he's at, and with all of this, we have to go in with an open mind and the ability to receive information. So I particularly like his information on Atlantis, and I like that he's calling everybody out. And I also like that, we'll get into a Sphinx video today because I like the Anubis angle, and that lines up with some sites nearby here in Finglehead on the north coast of New South Wales and the Gold Coast in Queensland to do with Anubis and Star Law, like the mouth of the dog. If you know anything about that site there, that kind of looks a little bit like Giant's Causeway. So not sure what that link is there, but wanted to pick up this interview today. And if you've seen the watch along from the previous episode, these are quite long, and I'm not talking a whole lot because I'm learning myself. So I'm soaking it all in, and I'll pause here and there, and we can learn together. So let's pick up the end of this one before we get into today's learning, and let's go.
That list. He has to be. You just saw the facts. This is what he promotes.
I will say this is a David Icke video where he's calling him out for his beliefs on soul trap and things like that. And I also don't agree with everything that David Icke says, but I'm more interested in the timelines and this particular kind of angle on Atlantis, because I think that this is really where the rubber hits the road with some of this stuff. But yeah, this is the end of a David Icke video, and the reason why I'm playing this is because he does get into he makes some comments on YouTubers, and I guess I'm creating content now, so that's what I wanted to get to.
Promotes heavily. He's literally copy and pasted all the mistakes of all these other researchers. The reason I know it's copy and pasted the mistakes is because he's not a genuine researcher on these topics. He hasn't gone into depth on Atlantis, or he'd have never made those mistakes. He's never gone into depth on the chronology of the Great Flood, or he's never made those mistakes. He literally assumed as true the Younger Dryas narrative. That's the danger. That's why I'm always calling these guys out for debate, and that's why none of them will ever debate me, because I will collapse that entire narrative in one single conversation. It's all BS, but it has to be addressed. You have no idea the amount of theories in the field that will all collapse to nothing as soon as it's understood by the collective that all that Younger Dryas dating is total BS. When that domino falls, everything else, and I'm telling you, you're going to be left with very little in the field that's still true. That's my presentation, guys. I'm done. What is 1 hour? Whoa, we hit.
And if you wanted to watch the actual presentation, it is called it's called Iconic and Archaic: Separating the Fictions from the Facts.
We hit 1 hour and 44. We hit us a little golden proportion number. I'm not gonna drag this out at all. I'm just showing you the differences between the Archaix model and the Iconic model. What David Icke has done in the past, how he basically came who he was, that he does provide value to the field. But once you've gotten to a certain level, I'm done. I am done with David Icke. I can't grow in that direction anymore. And there's too much that he's addressed that's absolutely false that I don't resonate with anymore at all. At all. So I have been wondering, it has been noticeable to me in the last year when I make comments on X or when I've done different videos that I get absolutely nothing from Iconic. It's like, wow. Archaix provides very original and unique research. And it blows my mind that all these podcasters and all these channels out here don't at least take concepts from Archaix and talk about them. Man, Jason showed all this. It's really compelling. What do you think about this? What do you think? None of that. I don't think there's another channel on YouTube that's been blacklisted as much as Archaix. How in the hell can you not find 100 different fascinating topics from all the information that I've divulged in over 1,000 videos that other podcasters can't even build their careers on? You would think other YouTubers would be trying to build their careers just interviewing other people about what you think about this Archaix concept here. What do you think about this? Did you see that list of 65 different Archaix concepts that he published the other day? Man, what do you think about these beliefs? How is it that across the field, Archaix has a massively growing and very loyal follower base? And yet, out in the field, Archaix is absolutely blacklisted. Yeah, you tell me. You put your opinions in the deal.
Well, I mean, I've got a lot of different opinions on that because I am in the tech world, and I know quite a lot. I made my living in organic SEO and search engine rankings and on all of that, and know quite a lot about how the algorithms work, and we all know that how things are throttled and censored and all of that kind of thing. But also, yeah, I mean, the ancient archaeology field is, I almost made a documentary on ancient Egypt, and I'm glad I didn't, and it was mainly because of the people involved. And yes, I have to turn my gaze inwards to do all the shadow work, which is what previous streams have been about. But I don't really think that it adds up, and so I am interested to hear some of these data points, and also challenge accepted. Archaix. Okay, mate. Challenge accepted. So, all right, let's go through some of your material, and I'll learn. And I will pick up some of these topics and run with it if it's good stuff. So, let me just do this, and do this.
Just because the whole world says something doesn't mean.
And so this video is what do we got playing here? A total dismantling of Hancock's 9,600 BCE Atlantis dating. So let me just see if I can do something here. So if I do that and then get rid of that and see when this is. This is from 2 years ago. 22nd of July 2023. This is specifically on the Atlantis dating, and I think the main gripe here is that Graham Hancock and that crowd mix everything up with the dates, so they bring the Younger Dryas period into Atlantis and kind of mix different events together, and that's also one of my main gripes with it as well. I think that a lot of the Atlantis stuff, a lot of people say it's Bimini, or a lot of people say that's in the Caribbean, or they say it's in Antarctica, or or in the Sahara. There's a lot of different theories there, and then there's like the advanced weaponry kind of angle of it as well, and how there was like a devolution of society because of a weapon that was used in the Atlantean times. I'm not really sold on a whole lot of it, so I'm interested. I have not seen this video, or if I did, I saw it like a long time ago. And then in that video where he that he had on with David Icke today, there's about 5 videos that he recommended to go through, and this is one of them. So this one's about 50 minutes or so. The other one's about 2 hours, so I'm not sure if we'll get to that one today. But I mean, I think that I differ with Jason when it comes to the dating. He's obviously got his timeline and calendar events like quite recent. Yes, the Younger Dryas period happened 12,500 years ago, and I've a lot of the science that I've studied comes from Ben Davidson, and I know that he had him on the show as well. And I know that there's smaller cycles than that, and I know there's these magnetic pole flips. And so, at this stage, yes, I do currently believe that the evidence points towards these 12,500 year cycles and 6,000 year cycles, and then even 25,000 year cycles, 75,000 year cycles, and that's the star law stuff that I've learned tends to go in that direction as well. But a lot of what Jason's saying is in the last handful of thousand years. So, not married to my beliefs, and happy to keep an open mind to see where the data goes. But not a fan of the simulation and the more recent versions of ancient history, but happy to be proven wrong. And then also, let's just get into it.
They're right. Graham Hancock's wrong, Billy Carson's wrong, and scientists are wrong. And all I want you to do is do a little thinking.
That brought the Younger Dryas to an end 11,600 years ago and raised sea levels massively. Plato said that the story came to him through his family line. His family line included the Greek lawmaker Solon, some 200 or 300 years before. Plato was writing in the 300, Solon's around 600 BC. And Solon made a famous and historically recorded visit to Egypt. There's no dispute about that. And that visit to Egypt was around 600 BC. So that tells us that visit to Egypt was around 2,600 years before our time today. So there's Solon in Egypt in 600 BC. He's visiting a temple that no longer exists, Temple of Neith at Sais in the Delta. And he's shown writings on the walls by the priests. And he says, what do these writings say? And the priests then unravel the whole story of Atlantis, and they tell how there was this great advanced civilization, which at one time was extremely beneficial and positive to the world, but which fell out of harmony with the universe, became domineering, began to impose its power on other peoples around the world, became arrogant, became overconfident in itself, suffered from hubris, and a ringing phrase ceased to wear its moderation with prosperity. And the universe intervened and struck Atlantis down. So Solon said to the priests, okay, when did this happen? And they said, quite matter-of-factly, 9,000 years ago. That's in 600 BC. Do the math. That's a date in our calendar. That's 9,600 BC.
Yeah, and I also get peeved off by pushing everything into the Younger Dryas period, and then also the comet impact theory as well. That's not to say the Younger Dryas didn't happen, not to say that the comets don't happen, because they are both a thing. But yeah, this kind of squashing everything into this timeline to make it all about that, just because that's what lines up with your other research. So that is frustrating for sure. So in agreement with Jason on that one.
That's 11,600 years ago.
In Antiquities and Chronology of the Most Ancient Kingdoms, Volume 2 by John Jackson, London, 1752. Man, I love this book. But we read on page 17, we read, having treated fully of the most ancient years and shown that the original year of all nations was lunisolar and consisted of 360 days, and how the solar and lunar periods were by degrees improved and perfected, and by intercalations made to correspond with each other, before I proceed to the Egyptian Antiquities and Chronology, it is necessary to show that in the most ancient times preceding the Noahic flood, and after it, the Egyptians reckoned the reigns of their fabulous gods and demigods by years of single lunar periods only, or of 30 days. This reckoning was peculiar to the Egyptians. The number of the Egyptian antediluvian dynasties, as I shall prove hereafter. Yet he observes very truly that the Egyptians reckoned a month for a year in the first ages of the world, and in the reigns of their first fabulous kings, whom they called gods and demigods. This computation enables us to understand perfectly the oldest Egyptian chronology, and to reduce it to a very near and exact conformity with the sacred chronology of Scripture. This way, of reckoning by lunar solar years of a month was used only in computing the times of the gods and demigods to the flood, and the times of the heroes and mere mortal kings who reigned after were computed by solar years, and they never used lunar years in reckoning the particular reigns of their heroes or their kings, who were esteemed as mere men. But it shows that Varro, this is Marcus Varro, Roman historian, knew that the Egyptians had anciently reckoned the lives of men by a lunar year of 30 days. Well, when they computed by this year, they represented the lives of the first deified men to consist of many thousands and sometimes myriads of years. Thus Manetho reckons the reign of Vulcan, the oldest Egyptian god, to be 9,000 years, which Africanus observes were basically resolved by historians into months, and they were undoubtedly to be understood.
One should mention about that particular date, 11,600.
Well, it's incredibly important. It's an incredibly important date because the Younger Dryas begins 12,800 years ago with a cataclysm, with a puzzling, mysterious rise in sea level at the same point, 1,000 years of freezing temperatures, mass extinctions of animal species all over the world, and then 11,600 years ago, global temperature shoots up. The last of the ice caps collapse into the sea. Sea level rises enormously. That is the date that work starts at Göbekli Tepe, and that's a point I've made many times, but it's really worth making because archaeology.
Not sure on the date on mixing in Göbekli Tepe in with that either. But yeah, I mean, Younger Dryas period, these things did happen, and this can be shown with these 12,000 year cycles that suspicious observers Ben Davidson gets into as well.
Just roll their eyes every time you say the word Atlantis, but that is precisely the date that Plato, which is the earliest surviving reference to Atlantis.
Right, and that's how you'll get into as well. Like, Plato's not necessarily the best source it's here either.
That's precisely the date he gives for the destruction of Atlantis, 11,600 years before our time. He puts it this way, that his ancestor Solon visited Egypt, and we know about that visit. It's historically recorded. That visit to Egypt was in 600 BC.
Plato claimed the Egyptians told Solon that Atlantis in Greece dated back 9,000 years from his time, which was 8,000 years older than the Achaeans that founded Greece. A critic of the pretended antiquity of Egypt was a contemporary of Plato. His name was Eudoxus of Cnidos, who wrote, "The Egyptians reckon a month as a year." This is a key to almost every single Bronze Age chronological system. Sir Isaac Newton, in his own exhaustive work titled The Chronology of Ancient Kingdoms on page 103, wrote concerning the lies of the Egyptian priests. After Cambyses had carried away the records of Egypt, the priests were daily feigning new kings to make their gods and nation look more ancient. A month as a year. Diodorus Siculus wrote that it was popular in antiquity to reckon the year by the lunar cycle. The ancient Frisian Oralind manuscript reads that before the Great Flood cataclysm, quote, the years were not counted. Unquote.
And as we look into it further, we find something else, that Plato puts a date on the destruction of Atlantis. He says Atlantis was submerged beneath the waves in a huge global cataclysm 9,000 years before the time of Solon. That gives us an absolute date for this.
Hey guys, you know what? I'm sorry I get emotional when I get to talking about prize old books. It's just me. I know. I'm weirdo. I don't mind being weird. But just don't call me weird. But yeah, this 1,200 years, man. A lot of people are bringing that to my channel, talking about such and such talks about 1,200 years. Excuse me, not 12, but 12,000 years. And listen, it's mentioned in historical texts. There are old chronographers that talk about it, but they are corrected by other chronologists. This 12,000 year number has been thrown out thousands of times by modern authors. It's all bullshit. Everybody wants to point it to the Younger Dryas period. Graham Hancock's books, his new Netflix channel blowing up. Look, man, somebody's invested hundreds of millions of dollars in this because they have blown his shit up all over the world. It's not just Netflix. Every platform is showing Graham Hancock going off. And when you listen to him, there's no data here. He's telling a story, but there's no info. It's not like listening to Archaix. We're going to hear what the source material is, and you're going to hear, okay, well, look, this is how the mathematics works. Pull your calculator out, and I will.
Right, and so this is one point here. And I do believe in 12,000 years, but that's not the point here. But the story, the allegory, the oral wisdom that encodes the mathematics. So if you know how to decode the stories, which was passed down orally, which is the human antiquities, the ancient history, the stories of how we got here. The references to the animals relates to a time period, whether they're talking about like a spitting dragon or if to be able to decode it, to know if you're talking about a comet or the period of time, and also it's got the mathematics of the universe encoded in it as well. So this is where the marriage law in indigenous tribes, they know who to marry, and they their whole like family tree and tribal system is all based on the mathematics that comes from the stars and to do with these stories. So they're not. What I'm getting at is that just because it's a story doesn't mean that it doesn't have the hard science and hard math in it as well.
Show you exactly what this calendar truly meant and why it wasn't 432,000 years. It was 432,000 turnings of the stars, which is only 12 centuries. And we have many ancient writers that say that. They say.
Right, and it could be true, and I'm open, but and I know that for example, we're kind of mixing and matching here, and I know that the scientific record says the indigenous Australians are 70,000 years old. I know there's some academic evidence for 400,000 years. My understanding is that the true elders say they're between 3, 4, 5 million years old, and so that's and there's an out of Australia origin model as well, and again not part of that uniformitarian model where it's coming from apes and all that kind of thing. That part's wrong, but yeah, I just not on board yet with this recency in ancient history.
That when Greeks copied or listened to Egyptians relay anything involving numbers, for some reason Greeks always added a zero. They always did, and this was known in ancient.
And what Egyptians are we talking about? Are we talking about the Egyptians that came much later, the ones that like the pharaohs and all of that kind of stuff? Are we talking about the matriarchal Egyptians that came before the patriarchal, or are we talking about the metristic, which was the balance between the masculine and the feminine even before then? So, and then there's also been as Jason knows as well, plenty of pharaohs or kings or whatever came much later and scratched out the names and put their names on top as well to make it look newer too.
Times, so 1200 year period that was being related by somebody to Strabo or Diodorus Siculus, it would later on become 12,000. It's ridiculous, it really is.
Then Solon asks, when did this happen? And the priests say, they're very relaxed about it. They say, 9,000 years ago. So,
what kind of priests are we talking about? Since when do we, it's just because they're a priest doesn't mean they're a true wisdom keeper. Priests could imply that they're changing up the story to keep the proper knowledge hidden too.
Immediately we have a date that we can put to our calendar. 600 BC, he makes the visit. 9,000 years before that, that's 9,600 BC. Give or take 23 years, that is 11,600 years ago. That's when Göbekli Tepe is built. That's when
I actually think Göbekli Tepe is older than that, so I'm sure Jason would argue that's far newer though.
Meltwater Pulse 1b begins to flood the world oceans.
And Schultz is an idiot. That guy can get stuffed.
And again, my critics will niggle away at the edges of this and say, well, Meltwater Pulse 1b unfolded over 300 or 400 years. If you average it out, it wasn't that much in any one year. But who says it happened at average rates? Who says there wasn't a big rise and then a smaller rise? Yeah. These things are very annoying.
So here's the title, Long Livers, a curious history of such persons of both sexes who have lived several ages and grown young again. Yet another one of those 18th century works with an extravagantly long title. I've explained that to you guys in the past. It was a tradition. As with so many books from this period, it was written by Freemasons. This one, named Eugenius Philolethes, who authored a prior book titled Treatise on the Plague. The date of publication for this book is 1722, and it is displayed here at the bottom right. The dedication page here begins the lengthy greetings portion of the book. Some of it we'll go into. Copies of books like this were spread throughout the lodges. Now it says, to the Grand Master, masters, wardens, and brethren of the most ancient and most honorable fraternity of Freemasons of Great Britain and Ireland, Brother Eugenius Philolethes sendeth greeting. So in chapter 5 begins with an admission that there were some who had written that the long years of the ancients was misunderstood. Pay close attention. He writes this: some maintain that this long course of years of the ancients was regulated by the lunary movement of 29 or 30 days. Sounds a lot like what I've been showing you guys from the other ancient records about the moon counts that were later turned into year counts, inflating the duration of kings and countries far beyond what is historical. So Eugenius explains a lot on how the confusion had crept into the records, and that it was never actually connected or worked out. Moons had become years. And now, written here, right here in 1721, we read, and I quote, from reading Lactantius and Plutarch in the life of Numa, the second king of Rome, might be insinuated that the year of the ancients was of no longer duration than one of our months. The Chaldeans and the Arcadians followed this use, as well as some other people, of whom Macrobius speaks in the 12th chapter of his first book of Saturnalia, unquote. Holy beep! Wow. I've told you guys many times and cited a few sources that show that the years of ancient texts were actually moons, that Graham Hancock and others are totally wrong about Atlantis being 9,500 BC, because the moon count system has the Atlantis narrative as presented by the Egyptians to be the 13th century BC, contemporary with Mycenae and the Sea Peoples Federation invasions and the attacks against Egypt. The story of Atlantis was real. The interpretation we've received down through the years is an anachronism. It's not true.
We know Solon. We know who he was. Solon was a famous Greek lawmaker. He was an ancestor of Plato, as a matter of fact, about 200 years before Plato. And around 600 BC, Solon, the great Greek lawmaker, made a visit to Egypt. And in Egypt, the priests at a temple of Sais in the Delta told him the story of Atlantis. And they said that it was written on the walls of the temple. And he said, when did this happen? When was this great civilization destroyed? And they said 9,000 years ago.
So yeah, like I said, my rant on Graham Hancock's not personal. I don't know him personally. But it's a little discouraging when you see a dozen platforms, there's probably more than that, but a dozen platforms pushing out this new show of his that he directed or he put together. And then when I listened to the show, I got Netflix, so I listened to the show, I listened to the first 2 episodes, I was like, oh my God, I'm literally nauseous. I'm sickened listening to this material. Because I've seen this phenomenon over and over and over. It is so prevalent when disinformation is being pushed. And the phenomenon that I'm talking about is when this is what the establishment does a lot. They do this a lot. Come on, guys. Can you go any slower? All right. What I'm talking about the establishment does this a lot. They will find somebody who has a very good reputation. that will find somebody who has established rapport and trust with the community that they pretty much lead. Graham Hancock is a leader of the alternative history movement. That's who he is. So the elite, they find this guy and then they back him. They back him tremendously. And the media, which is the tool of the elite, gets on board and helps push his material. But now he doesn't have to cite proof. He doesn't have to demonstrate any type of logic whatsoever to promote his idea.
Right, but isn't he dealing with all of the academics which are pushing back against all of his work? So when he has the arguments with those people, he's got to provide, evidence, right? Because he might not have the alternative version of history correct, but he's also engaging in dialogue with those people, right? But yeah, that doesn't mean that his facts are correct. And just on one other point about I know there's all kinds of different versions of timekeepers and that kind of thing. The stuff that I've been told is around planetary cycles, like to do with, Jupiter and Saturn and 60 years and 60 seconds and all that kind of thing. But we could be talking about something different here when he's talking about the moon being timekeeper.
He's already spent years of his life cultivating that trust. He's got all these people believing that if it's from Graham Hancock, you take it to the bank. It's all true. So now that he's in this position, they culture that and they use it, they exploit it. So now I'm watching this Netflix series like, oh my God, I'm so nauseous. It's like, now you get to just say what you want to say. You don't have to back anything up. You don't have to show evidence or proof. You get to say what you want to, and with good music and great graphics and visuals, you are being convinced. You are convincing people who really have no idea that there is absolutely nothing logical about your theory. And there's no data that supports it. It's crazy. Crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Plato repeatedly states that it is a true story. And as we look into it further, we find something else, that Plato puts a date on the destruction of Atlantis. He says Atlantis was submerged beneath the waves in a huge global cataclysm 9,000 years before the time of Solon.
In the melting of the Ice Age, there was a civilization. This is Graham Hancock now. And there are some academics that are opposing him because they believe in the Younger Dryas being the end of the Ice Age period, but they don't want to entertain the fact that there was a human civilization that was advanced at that period. And I have already showed you guys the proof, not the evidence, but the proof that the Atlantis story was the 13th century BC. Right here. Right there. That's the Atlantis story, the 13th century BC. Not here. Way, look at that. Hold on, look at that. Look at that. I got to travel way over here to show you guys this. No. That's Graham Hancock's version. Graham Hancock's version shows Atlantis to be an anachronism so far in the distant past that there's nothing connecting it between the, look at the chart. Thousands of years, way before it could have ever happened. Thousands of years before there could have ever been. This is the entire historical period. The Greeks didn't come till way back here. So the Atlanteans could have never been at war with them way back here. It would have never happened. So we have a problem.
So Solon said to the priests, okay, when did this happen? And they said, quite matter-of-factly, 9,000 years ago. Quite matter-of-factly, 9,000 years ago. 9,000 years ago.
So many of you are already aware that Plato's information concerning Atlantis, the Atlantean civilization, is entirely secondhand. His information comes through the filter of Solon. Now, we know quite a bit about Solon. We know he went to Egypt. We know he visited the priests. We know he received the story from them, allegedly, as per Plato said. It doesn't matter if that's true or not. It's just the idea of an Atlantean civilization as presented by Plato is very romantic. It's almost suspicious because Plato also had put forth his ideal civilization in the Republic. But let's assume that Atlantis was real. we have an anachronism, a huge, glaring chronological problem with the story of Atlantis. And that problem is a simple one. In the narrative provided to us about Atlantis, these events of the Atlantean War against the Greeks and the destruction of Atlantis was supposed to be 9,000 years before Solon had been given the story. So historians who have taken the matter, to hand and assumed it was true, have pretty much dated Atlantis' destruction to be 9,500 BC. Now, that's a problem. One, it's a problem that any academic would actually take that seriously for two reasons. One, 9,500 BC, there was no Egypt. Even Egyptologists will attest to that. There was no monuments, no structure, no infrastructure. There was nothing. The second problem is that the 9,500-year-old BC civilization of Atlantis.
Not sure I agree with that first point about there being no Egypt before that point, and I think what the Egyptologists say, they don't know what they're talking about. Yeah, they're just playing something else.
Atlantis could have never been at war with Greece because Greece was not around in 9,500 BC.
And Solon asked those Egyptian priests, when did this happen? And they said, 9,000 years ago. Well, do the math. That's in 600 BC. That's 9,000 years before 600 BC. We call that 9,600 BC. That's 11,600 years ago. That's exactly the date of the end of the Younger Dryas, and it's exactly the date of what is called meltwater pulse 1b, one of the biggest single rises overnight in sea level that ever occurred. So if Plato made it up, it's really weird that he picked precisely a date that coincides with the latest geological evidence on cataclysmic sea level rise at the end of the Ice Age.
You're going to have your gullible that believe in almost everything that's new. This is an age-old problem. But anything that is an extraordinary claim needs to be backed up with an overwhelming amount of evidence because it's an extraordinary claim. We're going to get into an extraordinary claim right now. Do you see that chart behind me right now on the wall? That chart, do you see the dome that's right here? Right here, this back area right here? That entire area you're seeing? Yeah, I'm going to show you right now. Well, I'm going to explain it to you right now. That area, all this, that's the entire history of the world that you come familiar with. It's everything you know about Ubaid in Sumer, in Egypt, Rashamra. It's everything you know about Babylonia and Assyria. It's everything you know about Mitanni and Mari in Egypt. It's everything you know about Libya and Nubia in Ethiopia. That circle area is the entire history of recorded human history. And that circled area represents everything that we have come to know in the human family from all the written records that have ever been found, excavated, translated, and disseminated. That circle that you see, or half circle, represents 5,500 years of cataclysms and floods. There's 3 great floods in that period of time. I've documented all of them. Told you.
Right, and as you know, that there's cataclysms happen cyclically and have throughout history. And yes, that's the recorded history. And so why do we have stories that go for tens of thousands of years that have been passed down orally before things were written down? And so this is kind of the main contention that I've got, and I'm sure that there's like a clever answer for this from that crowd. But so basically, what's the answer is that, oh no, that those stories are incorrect, and the books are the correct ones, and just because we have these longer cycles with more cataclysms and completely shook up the world, and everything is destroyed besides some of these megalithic rock structures and things of that nature, it means that. Because if they're not written in a book in the last few thousand years, that it means that there is no older history. I'm not on board.
You guys over and over. The Gihon flood which is 3439 BC, the Great Flood, which was the collapse of the vapor canopy in 2239 BC, and then the Ogaigian deluge, which was 1687 BC, and almost brought the vapor canopy back. That domed area you see is everything in ancient Greek and Roman and Etruscan history. It is everything from the Latins and Sabines and the Celts and the Gauls, the Burgundians, the Angles, the Jutes, and the Saxons. It is everything you know about all the cultures that built Stonehenge and Newgrange and Avebury Hill, the cultures that all Zimbabwe, everything we know. That's in all the encyclopedias and all the textbooks, all the ancient civilizations, all the excavations. Jericho in Israel destroyed 17 times. Did you know that, guys? Archaeologists have found 17 layers of occupation in the city of Jericho. It's easily verifiable. And yet it's all 17 of those occupations were within that period of time right there.
And Solon asked those Egyptian priests, when did this happen? And they said, 9,000 years ago.
No one knows what happened 12,000 years ago. It is 12,000 years ago is over 6,500 years before the historical record began. When we were first able to document things with precision, we don't know anything that happened prior to the historical record. All we have is conjecture. That's all we got.
Right. So this is where I've got a point of contention. You've got oral wisdom stories, which they claim have been passed down for tens of thousands of years, but you're going to call it conjecture when it's as scientific and mathematical and has all these same points that multiple data points that all lines up and connects things together as well once you study it deeply. So what we're just going to call it all conjecture because it's not written down in more recent books.
But you got Graham Hancock telling everybody that the proof that the geologists are right, the proof that the scientists are right, the very people that we distrust from the beginning, but that have been lying to us and always get caught in lies, the proof that the liars aren't lying this time, according to Graham Hancock, is that we have a historical account by Plato, who wrote the Republic, and in his Critias and whatever the other good dude's name, he specifically mentions that Solon visited Egypt and learned from the priests at Sais, who told him that 9,000 years in the past, there was a civilization called Atlantis, and they were at war with the Greeks. And Atlantis was destroyed by the gods in a great cataclysm. Now, we have a modern author who is using an ancient tradition that only has one single source from the ancient world. And that source is through secondhand information through Solon. Plato's not the source. Plato cites Solon. Solon is not the source. Solon says it was according to the Egyptian priests. So we have this information going through these filters. So it's not surprising to learn that it's not 9,000 years. Something got mixed up in the translation. Maybe it was Solon, maybe it was Plato, but one of those two mistook what the Egyptian priests were telling Solon. Because I don't think the Egyptian priests would have ever told Solon it was 9,000 years. I think they told Solon it was 9,000 lunations. Now, does my opinion trump Hancock's opinion that it's 9,000 years? Well, here's something you need. Here's a data point that you need to take into consideration. One, the story says that the Atlanteans were at war with the Greeks. We already know. Science tells us, archaeology tells us there were no Greeks at 9,600 BC. There was no one in the Peloponnesus, in Argos or Joppa. There was no one in those areas of the world that even the Dorians hadn't even come around yet. The Achaeans hadn't come around yet. The Mycenaeans hadn't come around yet. The Minoans hadn't come around. There was nothing, because the historical record is absolutely silent about anything prior to the 35th century BC.
That's 9,600 BC in our calendar. That's 11,600 years ago. Plato is telling us a great civilization was destroyed in a global cataclysm of flood 11,600 years ago.
That in the days of Plato, the greatest mathematician ever known is Eudoxus of Cnidus. He carries that badge. He is honored in that way by many ancient writers. Eudoxus was the mathematician of mathematicians. Eudoxus of Cnidus went to Egypt. He studied in the Egyptian colleges. He studied the calendars of the Egyptians. Eudoxus of Cnidus was an amazing student. He had become a master. He had come back to Greece, was elected for office. But what's really interesting is that today, when we think of Greek or arithmetic and mathematics, we think of Aristarchus and Euclid, like Euclid's geometry. But most people don't realize the majority of Euclid's mathematical material all came from Eudoxus. And then all these other ones were incorporated from lesser mathematicians and scholars of the Greek period. But Eudoxus was very clear. He disagreed with Plato. Eudoxus said that the Egyptians reckon a year as a month. So I am not going to listen to Graham Hancock or any of these other writers. And I'm not going to listen to any scholar today that tries to tell me anything about 9,000 years before. I'm not trying to listen to any modern historians or modern authors who are trying to superimpose a 365.25 day calendar that we use today over an ancient system which would have never been applicable. I am going to use the calendrical system that was used by the people who told the story. And when I do, it fits with 100% of what we know of what was going on historically at that time.
And he said, when did this happen? When was this great civilization destroyed? And they said 9,000 years ago. And that was in 600 BC. So that's 9,600 BC in our calendar. That's 11,600 years ago.
Thomas Bradwardine wrote that Plato's 9,000 years were lunar cycles. This was written 600 and something years ago. Pierre de Ailly, about 1370, arrived at the same conclusion. And in 1572, Pedro Sarmiento de Gamboa concluded it was 9,000 lunar years. And in 1577, Augustin Zarate, turn his page, also quoting Eudoxus, supported the lunar interpretation. These are in a book called Joining the Dots by Tony O'Connell. He's the one that put that little list together I just read. Now, he also said that Olaf Rudbeck asserts that Plato's 9,000 lunar months places the Atlantean invasion at about 1350 BC. Oh my God. What's interesting is that this is confirmed by Robert Argaud, Robert Argaud's a historian who mentions that this is the time period, 1340, 1350 BC, but he adds a new element. He agrees with me. Or, put better, because I'm a latecomer into this research, I agree with him that this is a description of the invasion of the Sea Peoples.
And Solon asked those Egyptian priests, when did this happen? And they said, 9,000 years ago.
Next thing Plato said is that Solon heard of Atlantis from the priests of Sais in Egypt. For those of you who want to spell that, it's S-A-I-S. So Solon heard about Atlantis from the priests of Sais. Sais was a center of Neith worship. This is a goddess, and they used the lunar calendar. They didn't use the Egyptian civil or the solar calendar. There's 3 calendars in ancient Egypt. They did not use the solar or the civil. They used the lunar calendar. Nowhere in Egyptian texts during this period do we find any dating of historical events using years. A lot of people don't know this, and they try to come into Archaix with this, they cite Berosus and they cite Manetho and they cite these other, you don't understand, Berosus and Manetho, they only wrote about Egyptian antiquities after Egypt was gone. It was no more. Yeah, Egypt, it wasn't, the age of the pharaohs were long gone. Centuries earlier, the Persians had already taken over, and then the Macedonians morphed into the Ptolemies, and then the Romans took over and said, listen, no ancient Egyptian texts during the pharaonic periods cite anything in years. That's not how they measured time. They measured time from pharaoh to pharaoh, and all events are measured as in what year the pharaoh took the throne.
Pharaohs came much later.
Such and such event happened in the 23rd year in the 4th month of Pharaoh Sesostris.
My understanding is that the pharaohs, if we're going through cycles of evolution and devolution, things had already devolved by the time the pharaohs were in there. So they're inheriting a more ancient Egypt as well. So not sure that lines up yet.
First, this is how they dated things in ancient Egypt. So for us in 2023 to look back and say that the priests of Sais told Plato that 9,000 years before that time that the Atlanteans went to war against Athens is an anachronism, because the priests of Sais would have never said anything like that at all. So the priests of Sais, using the lunar calendar, they would have told Solon that 9,000 moons ago, the Atlanteans invaded and attacked Athens. That's exactly how they would have said it. So this abbreviates the Atlantis story to 750 years before Solon was told this narrative. And 750 years was basically back to the beginning of the invasion of the Atlanteans, almost precisely into the Mediterranean. It's also almost the origin. It targets 1340 BC, which is only like 30 years after the founding of Athens.
If Plato made the whole thing up, he was just astonishingly on the money with the latest geology.
Plato says that Atlantis was a major naval power. Okay, I'm not going to go into detail. You guys who have been following Archaix for a long period of time, you already know that a major tenet of my research concerns the Heliolithic Maritime Empire, this major navy that kept sailing from the Americas and colonizing all different parts of the ancient world. So we're not going to marry that. I'm just reminding you that has a lot to do with like W.J. Perry's research from 1923 in his 550-page book, Children of the Sun, where he's talking about this ancient mariner race that went all over the world. So this isn't something that we're making up. We have the data to back this up. But you can watch those videos.
Polynesian wayfinders.
Atlantis was a major naval power. Atlantis navies invaded from the west. This is all very specific in Plato's narrative. The navies that invaded the Mediterranean invaded from the west. Atlanteans invaded and conquered many lands surrounding the Mediterranean. So Plato is describing that over a period of time, it wasn't just a 1 year, 2 year, 10 years. It was over a period of time that more and more fleets from the west, from Atlantis, arrived on the shores of Africa, arrived on the shores of Europe. These are the shores of the Atlantic, and they made their way through the Straits of Gibraltar, and they built forts and colonies and ports, and they basically occupied and they took over many regions. This would include like Morocco and Mauritania and Sardinia. These key locations were basically turned into Atlantean colonies. So everything that Plato was describing is very feasible. But these are fleets that are coming from a long distance, probably Central America or Northern South America, and they're coming straight over to northern Western Africa and passing along the coast through the Straits of Gibraltar, entering the Mediterranean and causing all kinds of havoc. Now, this scenario that is postulated by Plato is endorsed in the historical and archaeological record, and we'll get to that in just a second.
The source, the earliest surviving source for the tradition of Atlantis, is the highly respected figure of Plato. And he passes it down to us in dialogues called the Timaeus and the Critias.
One of the major hallmarks that identifies the chronological narrative of the Atlantis story is a fact that Plato says that the Atlanteans attacked ancient Athens and other areas in the Aegean. This is a major chronological marker. We call these chronomarkers. You can't ignore this fact, but this fact is ignored by many, many people who write or have theories about Atlantis. In order for the Atlantis narrative to work, you must first identify the origin and founding of the city of Athens. Because if Athens isn't there, there can't be any Atlanteans either.
Plato is the earliest surviving reference we have to this great lost civilization of prehistory that he referred to as Atlantis.
Now we have ancient authors claiming that Plato made a mistake. But do you hear Graham Hancock citing Diodorus Siculus, citing Strabo, citing Eudoxus? You don't hear any of that. Why? Because it completely, absolutely counters what he's telling us. Somebody's trying to call me and I'm not trying to answer while I'm driving, but it's ringing in my ear. So yeah, I have severe problems with the whole Atlantis is 9,000 BC because there were historians even over 2,000 years ago that were telling us otherwise.
Yeah, I'm okay with Atlantis not being what. I mean, I think it's loose at best to even just say, oh well, just because of Plato, and then just because of Plato and what he's and his earlier references to a priest. So it's very loose anyway. So I'm not particularly phased. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't add up. So I'm glad there's another perspective here.
But if that's your proof of a civilization existing at that time, then it shows me that you're not trying to inform the public of the truth when you're using a fiction that's been disproved. It tells me you're agenda-driven. You have a vested interest for some reason in getting people to believe in the Younger Dryas Ice Age narrative, and that Egypt is that old, and that Atlantis existed at that time. If that's your agenda, well, I can only make two conclusions. This is Graham Hancock's agenda, or Graham Hancock's a moron, a total idiot. He's either that, or he's on an agenda. He has been paid to lie to the public. That's you can quote me. You can send him an email and say I said that. That is the only two conclusions that I can make based off all the data. Because the Atlantis narrative is true, but it was lunations, meaning it happened in the 13th century. So, do we have any archaeological evidence of such a massive Mediterranean war at that time? Of course we do. Of course we do. We have ample evidence of that. Many authors and historians have written about the Trojan War. Homer's Iliad is all about the Trojan War. There were many who mentioned the Trojan War, the war of Mycenae.
Right, and so I think he's on the right track here, talking about these more recent times. But then, even though it's potentially not a part of the Younger Dryas, that doesn't mean that, and I know that he knows about the Younger Dryas, and that but then I don't necessarily see that as an argument for Egypt not being that old, or there not being cycles of 12,500 years and older, and like those kind of things. Because, I mean, just because Atlantis happened more recently doesn't mean that that's I mean, I guess it's kind of adding weight to his argument that it's all more recent in general, but yeah, just because it's not part of Younger Dryas doesn't mean that, Egypt's not that longer, or there's not much more ancient stuff either.
Against Ilium. The Trojan War's famous. We have a lot of evidence of a great war happening at that time. Do we have evidence of a non-Greek, non-Trojan player being introduced into the Mediterranean that could have come from somewhere near the Atlantic? Of course we do. The historical record is rife with the amazing and sudden appearance of whole invading navies from the Atlantic called the Sea People's Confederation. Of course we have all the proof in the world. Graham Hancock's narrative totally falls apart when we look at the actual historical and archaeological evidence of what was going on in the 13th century BC.
But the bottom line is 9,000 years before Solon is 9,600 BC. That's the Atlantis date. That's Göbekli Tepe's date.
Plato said that Atlantis had immense canal works. Immense canal works. Okay, well, if that's true.
Just going back to him saying that that's Göbekli Tepe's date, even in the ancient archaeology field, aren't they saying that that's like 23,000 years old, not part of Younger Dryas? I could be wrong on that, but I thought that they were saying Göbekli Tepe is much older.
The oldest canal works that have ever been found in archaeology date to about 3,500 BC. Some speculate using the long chronology of the ancient Sumerians to about 4,000 BC. But even if we give it 4,000 BC, the Hancock version of history at 9,500 BC for Atlantis is still 5,500 years too early. It's way too early.
Then Solon asks, when did this happen? And the priests say, they're very relaxed about it. They say, 9,000 years ago.
So here's another clue put out by Plato about the Atlantis narrative. And that is, Plato specifically mentions that the Atlanteans, not the Egyptians and the Greeks, but the Atlanteans were using iron utensils. And archaeology attests that no one was using any iron utensils until about 2500 BC. Again, 2500 BC is a long time after 9,500 BC.
And Solon asked those Egyptian priests, when did this happen? And they said, 9,000 years ago. Then Solon asks, when did this happen? And the priests say, they're very relaxed about it. They say, 9,000 years ago. So Solon said to the priests, okay, when did this happen? And they said, quite matter-of-factly, 9,000 years ago. Quite matter-of-factly, 9,000 years ago. 9,000 years ago.
And any nitpickers out there that want to just go into little hyper details trying to ignore all these chrono markers, that's fine, but you also have to take in consideration we are dealing with the Atlantis story is secondhand information passed down through a filter of 200 years. There's a gap of 200 years between the time that Solon was told this narrative by the Egyptians and the time Plato wrote it down. It's 200 years. So that must be taken into consideration as well. Remember, guys, I tell you, all the calendars of the ancient world and all the major historical events and chronologies of the ancient world were all written absolutely in retrospect. There is no one who supports 9,500 BC as being the correct dating of the Atlantis narrative that can support that with facts that comport with what Plato said. All they can do is show all kinds of psycho and scientific uniformitarian babble showing that something bad happened in 9,500 BC. I don't care what happened in 9,500 BC. A comet, a flood, anything could have happened at that time. I don't care what it was because it has nothing to do with the Atlantis narrative.
The source, the earliest surviving source for the tradition of Atlantis, is the highly respected figure of Plato. And he passes it down to us in dialogues called the Timaeus and the Critias.
This should get your attention. 270 years ago, a chronologist named John Jackson wrote Antiquities and Chronology of the Most Ancient Kingdoms from the Creation of the World for the space of 5,000 years in 3 volumes. He specifically wrote this to the Duke of Rutland, who was a knight of the most noble order of the Garter. In the text we read, the seemingly immense numbers of years contained in the Egyptian and Chaldean antiquities and history have made chronologers without due consideration reject them as fabulous and romantic. Throughout his amazing book, he goes in great depth to show that the tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of, quote, years, unquote, in the historic records is a miscalculation. They weren't years at all. In fact, he corrects this, and he does not mince words nor waste any time with the Duke, but gets straight to the point in the introduction to the book. This is what he wrote. But perceiving that these large numbers of years were uniformly carried on and made use of by the most judicious and learned ancient writers, without any intimation or suspicion made by them that they were fabulous, I judged that they were founded on real and true calculations, and only differed from those other nations in the manner of reckoning, and not in the chronology itself. And I found at last with great satisfaction that the most ancient computation of days for years amongst the Chaldeans, and of months for years amongst the Egyptians, warranted by the testimony of writers of the greatest credit, the most conversant in the histories and antiquities of these nations, reconciled all their accounts together, made them consistent with the course of nature and the history of the first ages of the world. And here we have it, from a learned man 270 years ago, relying on the ancient testimonies of older scholars and books and chronographers. Here we have it, that the Egyptians measured time not in years, but in months. That the Chaldeans, which is representative of the Babylonians and Sumerians and Akkadians.
At what period in time, though? Because if we're going from the data set from times of pharaohs in the last few thousand years, and I know that he's trying to say that that's all of everything in the last handful of thousand years or whatever, but the fact that a more recent version, a more devolved version of Egypt is measuring their time in with the moon and in months. Okay, that's fine. Yes, okay, that's fine for this Atlantis stuff, and I'm on board with that. You know, let's keep exploring the information. But that doesn't mean that that's what the most optimal or the most advanced or the kind of the ancient Egyptians were doing that also. Happy to be wrong. I'll put my hand up and say when I'm wrong. I'm still exploring this myself.
Measured time not in years, but in days. Makes perfect sense of the Archaix chronology of the interpretation of the Mayan long count actually ending in 2046, and absolutely exposes the whole Atlantis as 9,500 BC narrative as total crap.
If Plato made the whole thing up, he was just astonishingly on the money with the latest geology.
You just learned in this video one single fact that should remove tens of thousands of books from the shelves all around the world. But it's not going to happen because the establishment has a vested interest in having you believe in untenable theories. When we apply the single fact that was revealed by Diodorus Siculus and by Eudoxus of Cnidos, that these calendars, the common denominator between all of them is that they measure time in units of either days or lunations or months. These weren't years the Egyptians were talking about. Graham Hancock is a very learned man, and so is Andrew Collins. So is Robert Schoch, and so many authors before them. They knew better. They had read the same materials I read, but it wouldn't support their untenable theories. They want an Atlantis, a great pyramid.
The ancient archaeology crowd is one of the worst in the world. I've had some experience myself, but not on any kind of deep level or anything like that. But yeah, there's something. It's like the UFO crowd, unfortunately.
They want this Younger Dryas period of super civilization that existed in 10,000 BC. They want an ideal that archaeology and history just doesn't support. The textual archaeological record is very clear. All the civilizations of our world, all the calendars of our world, if measured properly, all show that the entire modern human experience, from the written word, timekeeping systems, it's all compressed within a 6,000 year period. It's all here. These books will be continued to be sold, and there will be publishers who will continually push them, but it's not the truth. These civilizations, these in vast amounts of time, they become amorphous. It's like Zecharia Sitchin's belief that Anunnaki descended 432,000 years before the Great Flood. It's so ridiculous. A great flood would not even have any meaning or any correlate with an event that happened 432,000 years earlier. There were many great floods in that period of time in Earth history. It's 432,000 shars, which is turnings, the stellosphere, which is only 1,200 years. And there are so many mysteries of the ancient world that are easily comprehended by just using the calendars that those civilizations possessed, and not any interpretations in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, and 90s that has been imposed upon those systems that the original authors did not want to convey.
So Solon said to the priests, okay, when did this happen? And they said, quite matter-of-factly, 9,000 years ago. Quite matter-of-factly, 9,000 years ago. 9,000 years ago.
All right, everybody. So that is a total dismantling of Hancock's 9,600 BCE Atlantis dating. So that's the overview. And I know that I'm not really adding a whole lot of commentary here, because part of what I want to do, and I know that everyone can just go and watch these on YouTube themselves, go to the Archaix channel, go through all the material. But what I've found, at least when I'm talking about these subjects with my friends, that, maybe people get a bit lost with all of the different, there's hundreds of videos. If you go and look at Ben Davidson's videos, he's been doing them for years also. If you go look at Mark Passio's work, there's 300. So we've got to find a way to get through it and get to the data points and use the trivium process and, look at things in the apophatic, look at what they are not, so we can see what's left over. So, do I have an agenda? The absolute objective truth is my agenda. And do I have my own theories? I guess you could say that. I think things are way older than what Archaix does, but, do I have the books? No, I don't. But, I guess you could call my information anecdotal, but, I think that these sites are far older. I think that there's consistent amount of cataclysms, which he also points out. And so, I think that these records are from a newer period in time, and I don't think that newer period in time is the be-all and end-all of everything. But I'm happy to be wrong, mate. I'm happy to be wrong. So let's keep exploring and see where Atlantis takes us. And so I'm happy to keep on going. So let's get to unraveling Atlantis. Ghosts of Poseidon. Dismantling Atlantis was 9,600 BCE. And so, just give me a second here so I can cue this up. So this is 2.5 hours. So I was going to watch another one, but I want to make sure that we get all of the data points. And so this video can be around specifically around Atlantis. And if you do want to go look at his sources of information, you can go into the video Unraveling Atlantis, Ghost of Poseidon. This mentioned Atlantis was 9,600 BCE. So yeah, let's get into it.
Hello, Corey Stern. I got your email. I was just reading your email 10 minutes before I started this broadcast. Thank you, Benny Riley, buddy. Audio's great. I'm good. Jeffrey? Is it really? That sucks. It's a good thing I'm not showing you guys. And sending me emails and dropping comments on my channel defending Graham Hancock. You need to know the whole story here. You need to understand exactly what is transpiring in this information community. We're in an info war, and I'm telling you now, you guys, if you're going to believe in these false narratives, you have to understand you are losing an info war. You are specifically targeted to be ignorant.
This is from July 2023.
And it's for a very definitive reason. You guys commonly ask me why all the deception. I'm going to tell you in this video why the deception is necessary, why they continue to foist these false paradigms on you guys. This is not the first. The Graham Hancock video I did, I'm done with Hancock. I'm done with him. He is inconsequential to what we're really discussing here. He's just a puppet, a talking head. I promise you, the man will never debate me ever on this issue. And you're going to understand clearly why by the time of this video. But my passion and my research and what I have brought to the table concerning the true history of Giza complex, the engineering function, what the historical record really reveals about the Great Pyramid, how important it is to basically our future and its connection to the Phoenix phenomenon. Two independent bodies of material that fuse together so perfectly.
Went in that Great Pyramid on an equinox on the it would be the spring equinox here in the southern hemisphere, but in the hang on a second to get my yeah, in the northern hemisphere it would be the autumn equinox, but yeah, it was like October equinox. And it had a blue lily ceremony in there. Threefold transformation. Story for another time.
So synthetically, I have had to produce hundreds of videos to show you guys all of this data. And recently, all of that was put together in montages as a refresher course, because we're going deeper on the Great Pyramid and we're going deeper on the Phoenix phenomenon, so you guys can get a clear picture of what is really being kept from basically the public. Outside of Archaix, who's talking about the Phoenix phenomenon? Outside of Archaix, who has even revealed to you all these things that I've pulled from all these ancient and old sources about the Great Pyramid? You're not reading anything like this in modern books at all. But I'm telling you, there is an agenda that wants to push the ancient aliens deal. That's why they're so well funded. That's why George Tsoukalos, or whatever his name is, guy with the...
This is why I'm happy to review this material. Not that I wouldn't anyway, but I mean the ancient aliens crowd, the Gaia crowd, and all of this ancient archaeology crowd is so full of shit. So I'm happy someone's pushing back against them.
Crazy hair. He's got so much attention on him right now. Believe me, this is all agenda driven for a very definitive purpose. This whole Anunnaki Zechariah Sitchin deal, the false chronologies, you listen, guys, that too is agenda driven. You have to understand where these men went to school.
Yep.
Yeah. Do your homework. You'll find out some really interesting correlates between Mr. Hancock and Zechariah Sitchin. Very interesting ones, and not just those two. Many, many people today you think are popular authors, I promise you, they are not equal to their books. Fingerprints of the Gods by Graham Hancock. I don't even believe the man wrote it. I don't believe the sociologist can even put together anything like that. And the book's not impressive at all, but I promise you, he's not going to come and to the table and want to debate this Atlantis 9,500 BC stuff, even though he has had millions of views across multiple platforms. It's not going to make sense to you after you see the data in this video, because the video that I released showing the clips of Graham Hancock saying 9,500 BC for Atlantis, guys, I wasn't picking on him. That's all he's got. There is no data to comport with that. But Plato, in a single statement about Solon receiving from the priests of Sais this 9,000 figure. But I'm going to show you there are very qualified PhD historians and archaeologists that I'm going to quote for you right here that have all completely dismissed Graham Hancock.
Let's do it.
So why is the man still on the international stage going around promoting this lie? It has been disproven from multiple different perspectives using multidisciplinary approach.
Yeah, well, because it fits into the narrative, and also, you know, shoving everything into the comet impact and the Younger Dryas and all that kind of thing. It kind of shelves everything into like one period of time and blah, don't know all the details, so you can just go Younger Dryas, blah, and then you don't have to think about it anymore. Easy, right?
These books here are here for a reason, guys, because I'm going to show you things that they're not telling you. They're not telling you about these things. This Atlantis story is absolutely real, but the only modern historians that are actually putting this out, they're unpopular. You don't hear about them a lot, but their books are genius. They tell you the Atlantis narrative because it is packed with historical chronomarkers that actually date those events and can be comported with what we have found archaeologically, and it can be cross-referenced with what has been left behind in historical texts. I'm telling you guys, Graham Hancock would never be so foolish as to ever be caught on video being debated by me about this topic. He knows this. His handler, Randall Carlson, knows this. Their buddy, Paul Wallace, knows this. Billy Carson knows this, and a host of others who have all put out this deliberate misinformation. Guys, some of these guys I'm telling you about, they are even above the collegiate level. They're very educated. They should have never made these mistakes, especially when real authorities on the first, second, and third millennium BC antiquities, archaeology and anthropology and history, real authorities have already published the data. Now, I have been accused of being a sensationalist and bringing all kinds of new ideas and concepts to the table, but have I? I have critics, and they email each other, and I see a lot of these emails. There's a lot of critics of mine who think that the emails that they are writing about me stay private, but people send me copies of emails, forward copies of emails to me all the time, and I get to see the inside of these authors' minds. I get to see how they work. And I've really heard some ridiculous stuff. Paul Wallace, for example, has two channels. I believe one of them is like 945,000 subs. Fifth Element or the fifth something, I don't know. But he has another channel with 100,000 subs, and I didn't know the man's name. I didn't know anything about him. Recently read an email though that was pretty dismissive of my research, but this dismissiveness was really cocky, and it kind of got under my skin. So, Mr. Wallace, when you're ready to debate this issue about 9,500 BC Atlantis,
don't know who that guy is, but yeah, the cockiness is a thing in these fields. I'll try not to be like that myself.
Please, my email is very easily found. Any of my moderators can give it to you in the chat. But you need to back up what you said in this email. You said you have a book published, and in that book, you have independently verified outside of the Plato narrative of 9,000 units of time. You have independently verified that Plato is absolutely correct. Well, it's time to put up or shut up, because if you've really done this, you need to come on my channel and explain to my listeners why you have found something that is an anachronism and absolutely historically wrong and can be shown from multiple different mathematical vantage points. We can show you an error. So I'm not picking on anybody, but we have a lot of people falling for paradigms that are taking him down rabbit holes. I would be remiss if I was to sit here containing and exploding with so much data that can be verified and not try to educate as many people as I can, when 17 years from now, our world is going to fundamentally change. That vapor canopy is coming back. And all those people who are going to be caught unaware as how to survive this, how to move forward, going to look back in time and say, damn, man, there was a guy trying to educate people about this way back, man. Why didn't he make a better effort? Why did he stay to himself? Why didn't he? No, that's not going to be me. No one is ever going to be able to accuse me of being quiet. Yeah. I didn't bring the vapor canopy to the table.
Yep. These people have all got something in common. Mark Passio, Jason Messiers, speaking the truth with hard evidence of the objective reality.
What I did is brought it back to the attention after it was deliberately suppressed. When the scientists in the 1920s published their reports, I showed you on my channel in 4 different books published in the 20s, 30s, 50s, and 70s, all about the vapor canopy. And even now, the Institute of Creation Research and other organizations are on board. They're doing vapor canopy research. This isn't something that Jason of Archaix ever made up. All I did is bring it back to your attention. Am I the one that come up with the 9,000 years of Solon was actually moons, which dates the whole Atlantis deal, not to 9,600 BC, like Graham Hancock and all these disinformation agents are telling you, but it dates it to the 13th century BC. Why? Why the deception? Guys, I didn't invent the Phoenix phenomenon. All I did was educate you on it over and over and over. I have not one single detractor, not one individual out of all the call outs. Anybody wants to go through my Phoenix phenomenon data, go through all that, and you want to debate that, you want to write a thesis, I have been inviting people for 2 years. Yeah, man, write down your thesis as to why it's wrong, and then come on my channel and talk about it. Yeah, haven't got a single taker yet. That data is amazing. So here's where I'm at with Archaix. I'm not going to take a back seat while people that have millions of ears are steady pumping out disinformation, and and this disinformation takes them further and further away from things they really need to know about, like the Phoenix phenomenon, like the real function of the Great Pyramid, and not all that Egyptological, mystical, occultic pseudoscience BS that's out there. The agendas are real because they take you down rabbit holes that waste years of your life. And they have a second function as well.
Not sure if I agree on the mystic occult stuff, because as we've found that all of this stuff leads back to master psychologists, ancient psychologists, and occultists. So, yeah, I mean, that's as real as anything else.
That function is to exhaust you intellectually, to rob you of your imaginative capacity. The agenda acts like the boy who cries wolf.
Yep, and the imaginal cells and the ability to, the imagination is one of the keys in all of this.
So by the time you actually hear something that's real, you're already too exhausted to give a damn. These agendas are very well funded by globalists. They do this intentionally. I'm telling you, because I know exactly where Graham Hancock went to school. And I also know who all his pupils were in the same classroom. This isn't something that's theoretical, guys. It's public knowledge. It can be found by anybody. This agenda is dangerous because it takes the population into multiple different areas and basically loses them in entire false paradigms of history. All these fallacies, all these introductions into where the actual free thinking individual is really at a loss to know or be able to ascertain between fact and fiction. But this is the value of Archaix, because like you guys say in the comments all the time, Jason brings the receipts. This isn't egomaniacal on my half. This is OCD. I bring the receipts because I want you to know every single source, who says it, where, when they said it. You need to know these facts because I haven't brought new things to the table. That's what I'm accused of all the time. And that's
nothing new under the sun. And yeah, bibliographies, and this is what I really respect about both Passio and Archaix, is that they read books.
And yeah, people praise me in the comment section. That's cool too. They're hearing new things for the first time, but they're not new. I spent my life in old books. I am now surrounded by those old books. And in those old books, I realized that almost everything that's being promulgated today is fiction or half-truths. There are channels with over 1 million subs, and almost everything coming out those channel hosts' mouth is an absolute fantasy of fiction. We're going to get to that right here, guys. I started off a little high octane. Let me slow down a little bit because I don't want to get aggressive. I want to be able to itemize the facts, because what you're going to hear here couldn't deal with the fact that their reality is bullshit. And when they come into Archaix and they see video after video after
let's get to it.
Any of this stuff, and I will trace it. On 200 years is a long period of time, and it was told by the priests of Sais. And this is something we really need to mention here, because the priests of Sais did not know the story per se. It is specifically mentioned that the priests of Sais interpreted the inscriptions. That's one filter. Whatever the inscription said. The next filter is the priests themselves. The next filter is Solon. That's 3. The next filter after that is a 200-year period between Solon and Plato. Without any, there's no correlate between them. How did this story transfer 200 years when Solon had never met Plato? Plato never met Solon. How was it transmitted? We don't know. But I don't even want to focus on that because it's neither here nor there. So here's some things that weren't discussed in the other video, guys. Anyone who has read posterior analytics knows they understand the genius and intellect that is Aristotle. I have read every known and published Aristotle text. I have read probably the majority of all references to Aristotle that are not in Aristotle's text, but are mentioned by other later authors. I was on an Aristotle kick for a long time because I really favored Aristotle over Plato. Now, Aristotle was the student of Plato. We find it very curious that Aristotle dismissed the Atlantis story as fantasy. Let that sink in. We're going through a chain of custody of information of how we got the Atlantis story till today. But it begins way back with so many just filters. And then the very student of Plato, who is world famous, Aristotle, didn't believe the Atlantis was true history. So now, here's something a little. It's also worse. It's also worse off. Over 250 to 270 years later, we have the next reference to Atlantis, but it's only a reference to what Plato said about Atlantis, and it's the Jewish author Philo. Yeah, this is a long period of time with no historical citations at all about Atlantis. Why didn't Diodorus Siculus or Lactantius? Why didn't Strabo? Why didn't any of these people give all the histories of Atlantis? Why? If it was so well known, if the history history was, well, I mean, it's so well known. Like today everybody believes Atlantis was 9,500 BC. It was a great civilization. Why didn't these authors talk about that? None of them talked about it. Now, 500 years after Plato recorded the Timaeus and Critias text, this is the only two sources for Atlantis that we have. 500 years later, it becomes the subject matter. It's just a few references, but the references appear in early Christian authors' texts. And all they do is cite Plato. Plato is still the source, guys. You got to understand, we're still dealing with a chain of custody that goes to Plato and none other. So this, it's not a lot, but we do have Proclus 700 years after.
So all the references for Atlantis go through Christian authors and Plato. And then Plato is referencing stuff from a couple of hundred years ago that he heard a priest say from, was it Sais?
Plato wrote these texts. We have Proclus, who is a Neoplatonist, and he mentions the story, but everything he mentions is just what Plato said. So again, we have this chain of custody, but Plato is the beginning. There are no other references, no other ancient authors. Listen, there's a lot of channels out there. I've been reviewing videos for a couple weeks, guys. There's a lot of guys out there that are putting out some absolute lies. These ancient historians do not mention Atlantis. They do not talk about Atlantis, and you would not believe how many popular videos out there that have had like 500,000 views or talking about Atlantis. They are absolutely full with absolute complete rubbish, lies. The historians they cite never said those things. Yeah, guys, you're not going to get it past me. Not
right. And then, but then you got also you've got all the woo-woo characters that, you know, again, it's all, you know, Atlantis is, you know, often referred to as high technology and being destroyed with advanced weaponry, or kind of a race that, you know, was significantly advanced in a kind of intellectual sense, but not in a spiritual sense. And that's what led to its own destruction. And that's kind of plays on kind of this ancient technology, 0-point energy, kind of planetary weapon type stuff, where that's got any ring of truth or not, you know, not completely on board with, but I'm interested to hear what, like if he gets into what Atlantis is outside of just the Plato stuff.
Not the Atlantis narrative. I'm not trying to hear that. So, Proclus, 700 years after Plato, Proclus, the Neoplatonist, you know, he's basically resurrecting Plato's teachings. And in so doing, he mentions that there was a historian alive right after Plato named Crantor. And Crantor went to Egypt, and Crantor talked to the same priest Solon did. And Crantor heard the story of Atlantis. Unfortunately, scholars have dismissed this outright because we have no writings of Crantor. And even more suspicious, we don't have any other ancient authors that even mention this. That is a red flag. So, yeah, it's it still doesn't support the 9,000. Even if there was a Crantor, and even if he did all that, and even if it was absolutely true, still it doesn't matter. It doesn't prove 9,000 years. It has nothing to do with it, the calendrical stuff. But after this, guys, we have nothing but references in the Middle Ages, where all of a sudden the Atlantis story started having elements added to it. After the medieval period, the Renaissance exploded with, you know, you remember Bacon wrote the New Atlantis, and just all of a sudden Atlantis stories and narratives and romances, and it's the backdrop for like French love stories. It's everywhere. But the chain of custody goes all the way back only to Plato through all those filters. Now, after the Renaissance era, Atlantis is just mentioned here and there. No one takes it. Scholars do not take it seriously at all during this whole period of time. and then the Golden Dawn Society and Helena Blavatsky and all these occultists and New Agers that exploded onto the scene in the 1870s, 1880s, 1890s, all the way to the early 1930s. All these texts, all these books, these are the sources for about 90% of all the Atlantis information that is published across all these platforms, and even in many modern Atlantis books. And every bit of it is invented. It's made up. None of that shit is real. So we have also Edgar Cayce. Guys, it's really damning that Edgar Cayce mentions Atlantis and dated it to the Graham Hancock type deal, because it shows that Edgar Cayce wasn't truly being hypnotized and pulling information out of the field and all that like he was doing with his medical stuff. Remember, guys, here's the danger of this. Whoever these people are that are funding all this disinformation, here's the danger, because it goes back to 1901, 1902, when Edgar Cayce had his very first experience. Edgar Cayce was genius at diagnosing things through hypnosis. He would go to sleep, get hypnotized, and his handler would talk to him, and he would give out very precise medical diagnoses and prognosis, and he was right on the money over and over. But about 10 years later, his handler started doing something else, started now using him for non-medical purposes, and now Edgar Cayce was giving readings on all kinds of historical and prophetic things. And he got so much wrong. So many Edgar Cayce predictions never happened. He got so much wrong. What was happening was that he was being fed information. These readings may have really happened, but it would have been him under hypnosis being told these things. And then under hypnosis, he relayed them in front of somebody else. The deception is real, my friends. They used Edgar Cayce to misdate things. He too may have been an absolute victim that had no idea this was happening to him. So, yeah, this is some MK Ultra type stuff from way back in the day, way back, 100 years ago. So this,
I don't know about that one way or the other. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure if he's been fed one. That's new information to me.
This list I'm going to tell you, we're going to go through this list real fast. It is so impressive. Any of you think that you can dismiss this? I personally, it's my personal opinion that there is something mentally wrong with you.
Let's get to it, big fella.
There is no way you can logically dismiss this much evidence when the only source in the world for 9,600 BC dating of Atlantis story is Plato through all those filters. When you hear this, here are just some of the sources, that say Egyptian years in ancient times were equal to our 30-day months. Oh yeah, guys. How about the priests of Neith at Sais who employed the lunar calendar? This is Plato. Plato told us. Plato said Solon got it from the priests of Sais at the Neith temple. Every Egyptologist will tell you that the priests of Neith only followed a lunar calendar. They would have never told Solon that 9,000 years in the past, this Atlantis story unfolded. They would have said 9,000 moons. That's exactly what they would have said. Additionally, the ancient Egyptians did not measure anything in years because they thought the year could not be trusted. Because 4 times in Egyptian recorded history, the sun changed its course. And with the sun changing its course, it meant to the Egyptians that it could not be used for an accurate tool of the reckoning of times. Now,
okay,
Eudoxus of Knidos said that the Egyptians counted a year as a month. Eudoxus of Knidos was during the days of Plato, and he was a genius mathematician. Diodorus Siculus, we're going to get into him here in one of these books. Diodorus Siculus wrote the same thing. The Egyptian year was 1 month. Lactantius, Plutarch, Macrobius, Manetho's 9,000 years, because Manetho mentions 9,000 years too, but Manetho was writing about Egyptian antiquities. He was a Greek, and he was writing about Egyptian antiquities during the Greek epic, but 500 years after Egypt had collapsed and was ruled by foreign powers. The age of the pharaohs was long gone when he was compiling his histories. But he said 9,000 years too. But Julius Africanus corrected it and said Manetho's 9,000 years is actually 9,000 months. Yeah, guys. Don't believe Jason. Here's another one. Thomas Bradwardine in the year 1340. He wrote that Plato's 9,000 years was actually lunar reckoning. Do you think though, with a little reading, according to Fingerprints of the Gods by Graham Hancock, he has a huge bibliographic section at the end of his book, meaning he must have read all those books. I can circle for you all the books in Graham Hancock's bibliographies to prove to you that Graham Hancock had access to all this data. Tell me he's not lying. No, he didn't make a mistake, guys. This is an agenda. Now,
boom.
Pierre d'Ailly, 1370 AD, wrote 9,000 years was lunar reckoning system, not solar years. In the year 1572, Pedro Sarmiento Galboa wrote that 9,000 years was in reference to a lunar counting system, not a solar one. In the year 1577, Augustine Zerotti, quoting Eudoxus, also said that 9,000 years was actually lunar periods, not solar years. Now, Eugenius Philolethes in the year 1721 wrote that the Babylonian and the ancient Greek calendars only counted moons. What? Yeah. John Jackson, 1752, in Chronological Antiquities, you saw in the video, he gives an overwhelming amount of evidence that these were moon count systems, not years.
Okay, cool.
Tell me again, Atlantis was 9,600 BC. Historian Robert Argod, about 1340 BC. Historian Robert Argod says the entire affair happened in 1340 BC by lunar reckoning, and it links the Sea People's invasion. He mentioned the Sea People's invasion as being the Atlanteans. They came not from Atlantis, they came from the Atlantic. Now, Tony O'Connell. I don't think I've ever plugged this guy before, but I need to. And if he listens to this video, he needs to know. Very valuable work you've provided, Tony. Tony O'Connell has listed so many sources showing that the Atlantis narrative is not 9,600 BC. That is the 13th century BC. Tony O'Connell, his book is called Joining the Dots, and I believe he has a website. It's Joining the Dots. Or there is a Tony O'Connell website where you can go to a page called Joining the Dots. You will get overwhelmed with data on this Atlantis deal. Yeah. Graham Hancock could not debate Tony O'Connell either. I promise you. So, numerous citations. 9,000 years of Plato was actually 9,000 months. Historian Olaf Rudbeck has the Atlantean invasion by lunar reckoning around 1350 BC. The reason these are different dates, guys, is because these are different lunar systems being employed. Nobody's really sure. It could be 27.52, which is our year divided by 13 moons. This is the 13-month lunar calendar of ancient Egypt. And some scholars factor it 27.52 days a month. Others just round it off to 30 days a month, and they use the 12-month system. We really don't know which system was employed, but both systems produce pretty much the same time period, 13th century BC. So, and early 14th century. So yeah, guys, that's all that is. I need something to drink. Before we go to the next part, we've only been going 46 minutes, so I don't have that urgency to rush like I just rushed. I wanted to get all those data points out, man, because they're incontestable. There is no one who believes that Atlantis was 9,600 BC that can go through and refute all those points. You can't. You can't. The best thing you can do is contact Jason and say, man, this was impressive. I didn't know all these things. I accepted all this research by Graham Hancock and stuff at face value, and I feel bad that I've been miseducating people. Now, that's the best thing you could do, because I would bring you on my channel and we could talk about it. And because I cannot lay to your charge that you accepted something as true that has been put out so prolifically. But I can lay to your charge that once you've heard the information and you ignore it, then it's open season. And don't be surprised what moves I make in the future. So, let's see. Okay. Yeah, I'm all for people changing their mind. There's been a few times on my channels, guys, where I've had to back up a little bit and tell you guys, you know what, maybe that, yeah, I think you guys might be right. And I've had to amend my own opinions about things. So, let me look at this chat. I don't want to ignore this chat, because we're about to go into these books. You need to hear these books right here, guys. How many people we got in here? All right. Relative dating methods work. Yeah, they didn't rewrite all the books when they found out, dendrochronology was supposed to be established science, counting tree rings. They didn't rewrite all the textbooks when they had factually dated all these historical events by the tree ring dating method. And then come to find out in the 1960s and 70s, some scientists come forward and say, hey, man, we might have got some things wrong. We found out that most trees grow 2 rings a year. There's 2 wet seasons a year. It's called spring and it's called fall. Guys, they didn't rewrite the textbooks. They kept the old dating. Even though everything's dated, they still held to the old dates. Yeah, guys, they do it all the time. They do this all the time. Scientists are the worst. The worst.
Agreed. Scientism.
Of data, and this guy wasn't pulling any punches about the Atlantis narrative. I'm going to read to you real quick on page 94 what he said. And these small books, they irritate the hell out of me with this small print. And I know I've got a large magnifying glass in here somewhere. There it is. All right, listen to this, guys. James Bramall, 1973. Very informative book. There is no archaeological evidence for the existence of civilized Greeks in the peninsula before the first dynasty in Egypt. It is an impossibility. That one statement completely kills 9,600 BC as the Atlantis narrative. Absolutely kills it. I do not know how Graham Hancock can sleep at night because he knows these things. This man's not innocent, guys. Quit sending me emails defending him and trying to neutralize this whole situation and trying to tell me, man, that you're a little hard on the guy. I'm not hard on the guy. I'm not. Yeah. I haven't even started on the other guys, but this guy here, yeah. Come on, he's a sociologist, and all of a sudden he started writing on ancient history in his books. I'm telling you now, guys, I have listened to many videos of Graham Hancock speaking, and I'm telling you now, I do not hear the eloquence of a man who wrote these texts. I don't. It's almost as if to me that, hey, man, check this out. We're going to give you this check. I don't know if this is true or not, but what other situation can I imagine that comports with this huge agenda-driven false narrative of history? How many people have they gone to and say, hey, check this out. Over the next 20 years, we're going to give you about $30 million. We're going to slow release these books. Here you go. your name's going on this book. Read it about 10 times. Make sure you know the material because you're going on a lecture circuit. Oh, I'm just imagining, guys, that was a matter of opinion because I can't see any other scenario. I just can't. I can't. I do not believe that Graham Hancock had researched all the books in his bibliography because the things that come out of his mouth do not comport with a man who is educated enough to even elucidate the things that are found in his bibliography. His bibliographies are really nice. Some pretty good, profound books in there. But why he cherry-picked what he was going to reveal as opposed to the drivel that he's putting out, I don't know. I don't know. But he could come on my channel and talk to me about it, and we'll figure it out together. This is awesome. Lost Atlantis. Book is just packed, guys. Absolutely packed. Put that away. Let's go to the next book. This is one of my favorites. Shelly, new member. Glad to have you here. Sorry, I'm ignoring the chat right now. We'll do Q&A when I'm done. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to keep up with that. Yeah, guys, it is not. I'm telling you, I have cited this book in the past on my channel. I wanted those of you who get deep into read. I know some of y'all order all the books I talk about because I know you send me email pictures of them, and it's a beautiful thing. That's why I love the Archaix family. Some of you guys are always fact-checking me, and it's awesome. Atlantis, the Andes Solution. This is the book I showed you guys that has a list of all the 50 traits and characteristics that are in the Atlantis story of Plato that you cannot ignore if you're going to date the story. Yeah, I don't want to tell you about it. Let me show it to you. Man, it's got maps, topographical stuff. It's just awesome. The book is awesome. So this is the list. I know you can't see it from this distance, but you can see some. You can see some. Yeah, this is the list right here. And it goes on for a couple pages. All that's the continuation of the list. All that's a continuation of the list. It's a beautiful list. But he also mentions in point 29 that one would have to employ a lunar calendar, and the result would be that the Atlantis story was in 1263 BC. And he theorizes that the Trojan War may have had something to do with the invasion of the Sea Peoples, and that the Sea Peoples came from ancient America. It's all in this book. So, what's fascinating is the pictures he puts in here. He shows. I'm going to get up and show you because he shows archaeological evidence that Central America was devastated in a flood that lasted for like 80 or 90 years. A flood that destroyed the cities, pyramids, and everything in Central America. Those people had to go somewhere, but their civilization was flooded out. Then he shows what they look like. It's very interesting because we see the exact same headdresses and stuff. The Philistine Trojan style headdresses. Yeah. Those were later developed from an earlier prototype that was feathered. You got to see this picture. 12th century BC. This is 13th century BC art. The Prince of Knossos in Crete. Look at the feathered plume right here. This is in the middle of the Mediterranean. Knossos in Crete. This is in the middle of Mexico. A Mayan noble. The hats are like the plumed feathered deals coming off their hats are absolutely perfectly identical. Now, we can say that's coincidence. We can definitely say that's coincidence. The only thing I want to bring to your attention, though, is that this book is packed with information showing that the Sea Peoples Federation that came from the Atlantic could have very well have come from the Americas. And he just goes into a lot of detail about it. It's something you might want to look at. I really don't care about that. That's not the subject matter of this video. But I will say that on page 69, this is crazy. Page 69. What is a Mediterranean-styled amphora doing in a Bolivian museum? And the amphora dates from 1200 BC. What is a Mediterranean vase doing found in a shipwreck off the coast of Bolivia? So you can't say there wasn't some type of trade or interaction in between the ancient Americas and the Mediterranean. So he goes on to list tobacco, cocaine, different things that are found in the Americas, coffee beans, all kinds of things in the ancient Americas that have been found in Egyptian tombs. This book is really good, guys. It's really good for another reason. Plato's 9,000 years before Solon is in fact lunar months, bringing the date down to a period from 1400 BC to 1186 BC. A sidereal lunar month of 27.32 days would give us a date of 1263 BC. Now, in the back of the book, I told you that there is a list 1 through 50 of all the things that you need to know before you try to date. Talking about iron utensils, it's talking about the use of copper, everything that's mentioned by Plato that a historian, an anthropologist, and an archaeologist would need to know to be able to accurately date this story. It's right here. Now, I've already showed that to you, but in the back of the book is another 50-point list, very detailed. And in this list are all the botanical and geographical and geological facts that are mentioned by Plato about Atlantis that you would need to know. And he's showing all 50 of these to show, man, this Atlantis had to have been the ancient Americas. This is very impressive. It's not the subject matter of this video, but I just wanted to show you how amazing this dude's research is. This book here in the bibliography will keep you busy for a long time just chasing his source materials and reading those books as well. Something that Graham Hancock should have done. It's just amazing. It goes on and on. This is just 50 points. Goes on and on. But this is the book, Atlantis, The Andes Solution by J.M. Allen. Here it is right here, guys. It's amazing. It is amazing. We're moving right along. Moving right along.
Interesting.
Check this chat before we go into the next one.
Let's fast forward it so we can keep on moving.
We're getting our San Diego meetup to the museum. Crap they've been telling us about history is totally false. I only read the first 24 books. I didn't know how to get the other ones. Actually, my dad sent me books 1 through 24, and I was never able to read. For some reason, they denied book 7. The mailroom had some rules. They said something was in book 7 they wouldn't allow. So I never got to read book 7, but I'm going to read it in my leisure time, probably when I'm traveling. And I'm going to catch up on those last 12 books because I got to be able to say I read that whole thing. But Eric, there it is right there. There it is right there. Oh, here's some books. Before we got more on Atlantis. I'm just one of my tangents. A real interesting book I found. The Destruction of Black Civilization, Great Issues of a Race from 4500 BC to 2000 AD. You guys have to understand, a lot of the most fantastic buried historical accounts that I've ever found were in books about subject matter for which I wouldn't ordinarily read. So I was flipping through this book in an old bookstore. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I need to read this book. So it's called The Destruction of Black Civilization. I'm going to read it. I'm going to let you guys know about it. You guys already know you got a video coming by H.S. Bellamy, Built Before the Flood. I've already done a Bellamy video. Remember I told you guys about the pre-Selenites? That in ancient times, civilizations used to divide themselves between the pre-Selenites and the Selenites. Those who existed before, that had histories before the moon appeared. Oh, a Dictionary of Symbols. That's a really good old book. Here it is, Box Saga. Yeah, there it is, the Box Saga. Keep hearing about this Box Saga book. I don't know anything about it, guys. But I trust Eric's judgment that it's a worthy read. I don't know how close it is to I don't know the Volsunga Saga. I don't know how close it is to I don't know what is it called, the Mabinogion, ancient Welsh triads. I don't remember. I've read so much material I lose track, and I don't know about the Box Saga. I can't remember. I know it's not like Snorri Sturluson's material, all his Christianized European. Answer me again how old Adam was. Methuselah overwhelmed me. But 1979, we need to go to page 22. 22's got something really interesting you guys need to hear. So it's Jurgen Spanuth, Atlantis of the North, 1979. He writes, Diodorus Siculus wrote of the Egyptians. This is 2,100 years ago. Diodorus Siculus wrote of the Egyptians, saying, some men would maintain that in earlier times, before the movement of the sun had as yet been recognized, it was customary to reckon the year by the lunar cycle. Consequently, since the year consisted of only 30 days, it was not impossible that some men lived 1,200 years. Answer me again how old Adam was, Methuselah, Noah. Yeah, guys, we have been taught deliberate misinformation. These men did not live that long. People were not living for centuries and centuries. It's untrue.
I think they were. There were definitely immortality practices, and they definitely knew a whole lot more about longevity. And then also the, when you take into consideration the kind of living more in harmony with nature and our true potential, I think living for hundreds of years is not out of the question.
The numbers are correct. The way that we have reckoned the passage of time is not, because we don't pay attention to the calendars that are in use when those civilizations recorded those facts. 9,600 years BC for the Atlantis story should be very, very humorous to you, comical. It's a Disney version of history. And you guys putting all that information out there, it's time to stop. It's time to start assessing the facts. We need to move forward as a community together, because I promise you guys, I'm taking no prisoners. If I find that you're being resistant and you know the facts, but you're not, but I'm telling you, I'm calling you out. Be ready for it.
Boom,
so
son.
Let's go with it's beautiful. This book is just overwhelmed with data. Atlantis of the North, Jurgen Spanuth. I know, I'm sorry, guys, I'm quoting all these books because I already know you're going to order them. I already know some of you guys are just going to order them. And look, you're just going to have to save your money or go ahead and take that hit on that credit card. Because today I got to tell you all about these books. Okay. This one's good. Remember, guys, the vapor canopy. What's this called? It's called the flood from heaven. What? All right.
The earth flipping over.
This is Eberhard Zanger. He's got a real weird name, but you know what? If he's listening to me, I apologize. This is a book from 1992, and I love it. I love this book. Now, why he stands out. First of all, Graham Hancock will never be caught in a room with this man. This man is a PhD historian, archaeologist. This man knows his shit. And he knows absolutely that 9,600 years BC for the Plato narrative of Atlantis is absolute fantasy. Knows that absolutely, dude. This book, out of all these books, guys, if you're ordering any one of them, this is the one. This is the one. So let's go to page 101 and just look, see what he says. Page 101. My God. Big book, small print. As was said before, the story will provide many particulars: individual states or kingdoms in Greece, a united Greek army, citadels, bronze weapons, chariots, a large navy fleet, shipyards, and horse race courses, which should help to fix an archaeological date to assume such a level of achievement. For this to be 10,000 BC is patently absurd. But it does correspond to the last centuries of the Bronze Age, specifically 1400 to 1150 BC, and no other time in Mediterranean prehistory. Archaeology, history, anthropology all condemn 9,600 BC Atlantis narrative of Graham Hancock and all his followers. Absolute baloney. But there's a hidden gem in here. Approximately 1150 BC for the total collapse of the Bronze Age. Those of you who have been following my Phoenix research, you already know why that is. You already know the Phoenix appeared, and it started a 300-year-old Greek Mediterranean Dark Age. Right. That's right. That's exactly what happened. All right, let's see. Debbie Snow. Debbie Shaw, order dispatched. View order details. That's good stuff. All right, Debbie, read that book. Read that book. Naked Tweaker, you need to review all the Phoenix material before you assume that the world before 1902 was much different than the world after 1902. Phoenix, that was a soft reset, and it was a lot of edits that took place, and you'll understand it when you see those videos. But the problem is a lot of you new to my channel bring in that baggage from other channels thinking that resets are something new. It's new vernacular. It's not. I cite many historians in my former videos that were talking about resets and openly admitting to the existence of resets. One of them is Arnobius.
Yeah, and that I know this to be true because the indigenous wisdom stories, the oral wisdom stories, they're all about cataclysm, and people don't really want to hear that. But yeah, they're all about cataclysm cycles.
This goes into great detail about resets, and this was 16 centuries ago. So, yeah, this 1902 reset was a soft reset. At the most, maybe 50,000 people died on record from cataclysmic type stuff, but many new things suddenly appeared in our world, and old things just vanished and disappeared. So it's very interesting about 1902. But 2040 is not going to be a soft reset by any stretch of the imagination, and the data for that is overwhelming. I have that book, A Short History of the World, 1922, H.G. Wells. I have that book. I have read that book. I have dog-eared that book, and my pencil marks are everywhere in that book. That's a good book. H.G. Wells, A Short History of the World. Yeah, that's a good book. He gives it to you. Making cornbread and listening to Jason. Man, I wish you could send me some of that cornbread. I love cornbread. Cornbread, warm. Cornbread warm and with a lot of butter. Oh man. But he's still very good. He's learned, he's very well traveled. I'm impressed with his this is the Lost City series, and I really like his series. But even David Hatcher Childress has fallen prey to the modern narrative. Let me explain, because it's very overwhelming how much the media has pushed this alt version of history about 9,600 years BC. Let me show you what this is. The lost cities of Atlantis, ancient Europe, and the Mediterranean. Here's a passage from Childress's book. I've read this book at least 4 times. I've read every Childress book at least 4 times, except his The Mystery of the Olmecs, which is on my shelf right there, because you guys are going to get a video about the Olmecs, because the Olmec culture is intrinsically connected to the Phoenix phenomenon. I love cornbread and beans. That's great. All right. This is David Hatcher Childress on page 72 of this book. Some scholars have even tried to equate the invasion of the sea peoples with the invasion from Atlantis that Solon mentions in Plato's account. The logic is that the 12th century BC had a great war, and an invasion from the west did occur, as Plato had said. Therefore, Plato was embellishing on the early Greek history and had his dates wrong. This would place the war with Atlantis at only 1,000 years before Plato rather than 9,000 years. David Hatcher Childress nailed it right here. Nailed it. Because that's the 13th century BC. He nailed it. Well, 14th century BC. He nailed it. Then he goes on and F's it all up. He continues. It seems to me that the Greeks of Plato's time had a pretty good idea of their own history of 1,000 years earlier. Witness the Iliad and the Odyssey, Homer's epics of Troy, and the early adventures of seafarers like Jason and the Argonauts. The Greeks were familiar with this historic period of their history, while Atlantis was of a time many thousands of years earlier, or so the Egyptian priest told the Athenian statesman Solon. So David Hatcher Childress, just flowing in his writing, assessing all the data, actually nailed it, got it perfectly, and then was basically overcome with the idea that the Greeks would know their own history, which shocks me because we have references from ancient writers who absolutely admit that the Greeks only count their history going back to the two events called the Trojan War and the 7 against Thebes, and everything before that is in the realm of mythology, which includes Jason and the Argonauts. So,
mythology.
I would have thought David Hatcher Childress. It's so weird that you nailed it and then turn around and undid exactly what you had expressed to be true. You just totally undid it with the idea that the Greeks would know their own history. David, I'm sorry, bro. I've always plugged you, but I am totally against what you put in this book. Totally against. And you should be too after listening to this video. It doesn't mean you're a bad fellow, and I'd always have you on my channel because I respect your research. And yeah, David Hatcher Childress is always welcome in Archaix, even though you're a part of the Ancient Aliens franchise. I've watched many of those videos, and I see that you're not really playing along. I see that they use you for your historical knowledge, and then they build their narrative around some of the data you provide. It's very interesting.
Ancient Aliens sucks so hard.
You're always leaving the existence of aliens open, and that's cool with me. I understand that. I get it. Okay, guys. So, last thing I want to tell you, we can't. Well, I got a few things to tell you, but we can never have a discussion about the historicity and chronological accuracy of the dating of the Plato narrative of Atlantis without mentioning another one of my favorite authors. And I've mentioned him quite a few times on my channel as well. And I promise you, Graham Hancock and all his followers won't debate this man about the chronological timing of the story either. His name is Frank Joseph. His books on Atlantis are fantastic. The Destruction of Atlantis is in my library. Now, I also have another book by Frank Joseph that follows up on this, and I can't remember what it's called, but The Destruction of Atlantis, Children of Atlantis or something, or I don't remember, but he's got a second book that follows up on it. But Frank Joseph nails it to the 13th century BC, and he also identifies the Sea Peoples Federation as being the ones that Plato was talking about as the Atlanteans that came from the Atlantic. He nailed it too. Frank Joseph definitely has. I don't even know where my seal is. I got a seal in here somewhere, but yeah, you know what? Frank Joseph rings my bell. Yeah, man. So, before we get into Q&A, we're going to talk about something. Yeah, Nick K. Evolution Cruncher's getting rarer and rarer. If anybody can find a PDF, or if anybody has a PDF, because I believe I found one in the past, and I read it in prison. I took because I'm hungry. So they give up. They give up. They don't want to know about the past anymore. It's like The Boy Who Cries Wolf. You are flooded with so many theories that when you finally hear the truth, you trip over it, get back up, brush off your knees, and keep on going without realizing what happened to you. And this is all by design. The reason why 9,600 BC is so pushed today in modern times, it was a mistake, guys. We have to understand it was a genuine, forgivable mistake because ancient authors were using the wrong calendar to interpret an accurate story. It's a genuine mistake. That's why I don't fault people for that. But for those who find all this data out and then continually to push 9,600 BC as fact, it's no longer a mistake. You've come into contact with accurate information that can be verified. It's no longer a mistake. It's an agenda. So why? Why would Graham Hancock and so many other people push a false narrative? Why? Because it supports another false narrative that has billions of dollars behind it. Guys, remember, I have videos that educate you that even the scientific community can't even agree how an ice age is possible. There are 60 different theories in the scientific community as to how an ice age could even be possible. Do you know why? Because when they first came up with an ice age theory, other scientists from another discipline said, okay, well, if that's true, what do we do with these data sets?
Yeah, this is where this multidisciplinary science field, which Ben Davison has done from Suspicious Observers and puts together how these, the crustal displacement and these magnetic pole flips can create an ice age within a few days.
And they couldn't be answered for. So, okay, well, ice age couldn't have happened that way because these paleobotanists do have a point. And then geologists would come up and say, hey, if the ice age is true, it couldn't have happened that way. We're not saying it's not true, guys. We're saying that it couldn't have happened that way because we have this evidence here. What about this? And those data sets would be presented in the 1840s and then the 1850s and the 1860s and the 1870s, all the way up to 2017. There are 60 different ice age theories because the scientific community can't let go of the model, even though every discipline has provided evidence that it couldn't have happened. Why? Why all the deception? Because 9,600 years BC takes the alt history community and uses it to support the Ice Age theory. Because even if you don't believe Atlantis was 9,600 BC, you're still left with Ice Age being presented as fact, even though we have maps. We have maps, and Graham Hancock has even talked about some of these maps. He even infers that they're just copies of maps from 10,000 years ago. It is patently absurd. We have maps that show Antarctica absolutely ice-free, the valleys, the rivers, and the mountains in their correct topographical coordinates.
Right, because there's cycles where they go between tropical and ice. So I don't know why that disproves Ice Age stuff.
Everything is fine. The maps are good. How do those maps exist? If the North Pole, not the North Pole, but excuse me, if the Arctic and the Antarctic have been covered in packed ice that goes over 1 mile to 2 miles high in different areas, if that's true, which they tell us, how were those maps made? How were those maps even found? Charles Hapgood in the 1950s, Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings. I've talked about it a lot on my channel. Irrefutable proof. It's not the only one. Orontes Fentis map. That's not the only one. There are several maps that have been found. Martin Leakey's in the chat. He knows by heart all the maps that show Antarctica. Those maps should not exist if the Ice Age is a real thing, but it's not. Why do they promote 9,600 years for
What do you mean it's not a real thing?
Atlantis? Because just the theory, whether it's true or not, just the theory implies that Ice Age is fact when it's not. I have a video called 1871 Cyclical Flood Theory. Martin Leakey was a part of that video. In that video, I read to you passages out of a book where a geologist in the 1870s completely smashed Ice Age theory with the data he had available to him in that time. Ice Ages were not true at all.
I don't know what he means by that. Yes, cyclical floods are a thing, but what you're saying is like never ever an ice age. That's I mean, I'm open to all things. Let's see where the data takes us. But my understanding is that we cycle in between when the magnetic pole flips. So we've got cycles within cycles. Obviously, Jason has got his Phoenix cycle, and then we've also got our 6,000, 12,000 year cycles. But yeah, I don't know why it would be so hard to believe that we have pole flips and changes in between ice ages and non-ice age periods.
He showed exactly what the evidence showed. He showed the distribution of boulders was not by glaciation. He showed exactly how it all happened. His theory is fantastic, and it explains the anomalies we have in the geological record. Yeah, it's a harrowing video because what's being described in that video about what happened to the animals and why we found them perfectly preserved without decay in the permafrost. Mammoths, saber-toothed tigers,
snap frozen because of magnetic pole flip.
Tigers, giant tree sloths. Yeah, they're all there, guys. North America, Alaska, Siberia, Russia. They're still being found. Those carcasses are still being thawed out. The meat is being chopped up and given to sled dogs, even today. Ice Age, the Ice Age whole narrative falls apart upon scrutiny. That's why they need to develop and push all these different ideas and theories that infer Ice Age as fact. Ice Age isn't debatable. What's debatable is Atlantis. Ice Age isn't debatable. Civilization X, which is believed by many occult historians to be in the 10,000 BC off the Edgar Cayce readings, and the Helena Blavatsky readings and the Golden Dawn readings is 10,000 BC. So Ice Age is not what's being disputed. It's the alternative history theories that put things in the Ice Age. Yes, guys, it's very clever what they're doing. This is an agenda. So why is it important? Why is it so important that Ice Age is completely pushed on us as a historical fact when there's 60 different scientific theories about it because scientists can't agree how it's even possible?
Right, but the scientists were covering up the cycles of the cataclysm and the magnetic pole flips, and so changing from tropical to ice age is part of that, right? At least from what all of the science that Ben Davidson goes through, and I've been through that extensively, and I believe that to be true, and I'll continue to do more research, but the fact that there's 60 different scientists with all different versions of Ice Age is to me is more proof that they're muddying the waters, because while all these people are building their bunkers to survive different cataclysmic events, they muddy the waters with global warming stuff and the WEF version of things and man-made stuff, but then they also muddy the waters with the Ice Age stuff. So yeah, that's not evidence to me that the whole thing is bullshit.
That an Ice Age happened. But scientists are locked in a multidisciplinary web, and they can't get out of that web because they see that there's 2 miles high of snow and packed ice in the Arctic and in the Antarctic. So an Ice Age must have happened, right? Wrong. 9,600 years BC Atlantis is promoted because they can't let you know what the historical record really reveals. I got a video on Acambaro. Remember? The Acambaro artifacts are 35,000 artifacts, and many of them can be good. You can go to Mexico today to the Ica Museum and look at them for yourself. What was found in Mexico of humans and dinosaur-like creatures and megafauna all interacting together at the same time. They don't want you to know about the vapor canopy period, because the vapor canopy period completely reassembles everything that they have told us in the historical record.
I mean, maybe the official historical record, but just because there's a vapor canopy doesn't disprove these different magnetic pole cycles and ice ages. It just means that things there's cyclical cataclysmic events, and vapor canopy is part of that story.
The boundary wasn't millions of years ago. They've never adequately explained why we have thousands of specimens of fossilized jellyfish that were flash frozen a mile under salt water. The real history of the world is an event that flash froze the entire world. Flash froze. Over a mile of depth in all the oceans, all these things were fossilized.
Cyclically.
They were flash frozen, and then after centuries of thawing out, the slow thawing out, you got to understand, salt water is packed with minerals. This is what a fossil is. When the biological materials thaw out and begin to decompose, they are replaced with silicates and minerals from the surrounding ice, and the fossils appear. This is how an invertebrate like a jellyfish or a sponge can be found in fossilized form.
Right.
This is why fish in the middle of swallowing other fish were flash frozen and fossilized.
Right. So everything's flash frozen, but it's not an ice age. And it all happened in one day, but it's not an ice age.
The scientific model that we have today for the fossilization process doesn't work for these models. How do you get thousands of fossilized jellyfish? They don't have bones. They're perfectly preserved. Everything about them is preserved anatomically. How do you get fish in the middle of giving birth to other fish? How? Not all fish just lay fish eggs. We have marine creatures in the fossil record pushing out babies through their hip bones underwater, flash frozen, and now we have them fossilized in our museums. How is that possible? It's not possible by the scientific method and description of history. It is possible if the entire world was flash.
Well, the scientific method is different than science in textbooks. We know that, of course. Scientific method is just finding the right answer through scientific means.
Frozen, which is exactly what we find with 2.5 million mammoths with tulips still in their mouth in Siberia. It's exactly what we find, and it's exactly what is described in the historical.
Right. So snap freezing events in the space of a day from things like crustal displacement from a magnetic pole flip, creating an ice age, but it's not an ice age. I'm confused.
Record. We had a vapor canopy world of very high humidity, very intense atmospheric pressure, volcanic outgassing of ambient radiation. We literally world where everything was provided. Humans did not. There was none of that. Humans had everything. They just had to eat it. Grew everywhere. We had a world that was like land of the lost. People, animals, amphibians, reptiles, flora, fauna, insects all grew to huge sizes. The vapor canopy period explains the fossil record, explains all these skeletons and fossils and pseudo dinosaurs and giant reptiles and giant. It explains all that. In the historical record, when this flash freezing occurred, the survivors made it in caves. Civilization totally collapsed. They described it as the day the sky fell. How did they describe it? They said the sky was an ocean above, and then one day it fractured like glass, and the pieces fell to the earth. and destroyed the world. And the pieces were followed with about a 40 to 60 day period of nothing but intense rain. Volcanoes were erupting. The whole entire world was shook up. And you can get a real good visual of how chaotic and how terrible it was in several of my videos, especially the 1871 video. 1871 cyclical flood theory, of how hundreds of millions of life forms thawing out were all floating on the water together, and as they decompose, they fuse together. Islands of dead bodies just putrefying, floating on the top. And then as the water went down, these islands of dead bodies were deposited. And this is why archaeologists have found what is known as the megafauna boneyards, because they are so mixed together. It's because for weeks they were floating together, pressed together. Their limbs all got together. As they were decomposing, they fused together. Yeah, islands of the dead floating for weeks after this cataclysm. 9,600 year BC Atlantis narrative is pushed because it absolutely infers that the Ice Age is fact. What's not fact is dating Atlantis. This is why they don't care if you don't believe Atlantis or not. It promotes controversy. The controversy itself has a backdrop. That backdrop is a factual Ice Age, which is actually not factual at all. The true history of the world is vapor canopy. The vapor canopy ended. The day the sky fell was the great flood of biblical and international cultural fame. The day the sky fell was when the sun was born. That's why all these ancient mythological systems say the sun was born almost in an instant. And in ancient Americas, it was the water sun. Yeah, in the Sumerian pantheon, it was Utu Shamash. She was just suddenly born after the Sumerian history was so old. After Egyptian pantheon was already well established, all of a sudden Horus came in, the son of the sun. He came into the pantheon. This is the story all over. When Spider Grandmother, her web across the sky collapsed, and it ended the age of the stone giants. And Spider Grandmother was never seen again. Remember, Spider Grandmother is a reference to Arachnid. The seven kings of the Anunnaki came from a matriarch. She is called the eighth. She is mentioned in the book of Revelation as well. When the seven kings return, there is a reference in the apocalypse to the return also of the eighth. The eighth is the only female. It is the ancient matriarch. This is why Kali of ancient India had 8 arms. This is why the oldest references to the Egyptian pre-cataclysm king was Scorpion King, which is an arachnid. All these references are to the vapor canopy period when the matriarchy was ruling over these cultures. So all this is in my videos, guys. Nothing I'm saying right now is new. It's all.
When so people get into this patriarchy and matriarchy, but the thing that people don't understand is that there's a matristic society, which is where the divine masculine and feminine were living in harmony, and that's always left out because they're trapped in this dichotomy of the patriarchy and the matriarchy, especially when you're starting to get into places like Egypt. But yeah, in much more ancient times, it was called a matristic society.
Covered in many presentations on my channel. Let's see. You know what? I haven't used this feature at all. Matt Kubas, how you doing? I ain't seen you in a while, man. I'm going to go ahead and put you right there, man. Vapor Canopy donation. I appreciate that, man. As I get more, the one phenomenon that our historians have spent a tremendous amount of energy covering up. It's the Phoenix phenomenon. It's the reason why we have the Anno Domini calendar right now. Remember, guys, I got a fantastic video on the AD calendar and why it was created. The calendar we're under today was specifically created to hide the Phoenix calendar. Yeah, this isn't Jason making this up. I cite the sources. I read to you the text. I show them on the screen. That's the why. Ice Age is promoted. false dating is promoted. False theories about the past is promoted. Vapor canopy is totally ignored, and everything else is brought to the table. Everything.
All right, I'm happy to get into the vapor canopy and the Phoenix cycle, but I also don't think that disproves the Ice Age stuff. I think I could be wrong, but when you say an Ice Age stuff, I'm not necessarily. I don't know if he's because he also talks about different cataclysmic events and pole flips and all of that as well. So he must have a different version of how that happens.
Because once vapor canopy history is acknowledged, the dinosaur narrative falls apart. Once the dinosaur narrative falls apart, so does the geologic column of
When his main dinosaur narrative falls apart.
all the different layers being millions of years. It's a domino effect. Once the vapor canopy is truly acknowledged, and it truly answers for all the enigmas of the ancient past. However, once the collective agrees that, okay, the vapor canopy was real, the only conclusion can be is to follow the data like I did, and you'll find out all about the Phoenix phenomenon. And that is the end game. The Phoenix phenomenon is what Martin Leakey and I have been finding over and over and over and over in all these old alchemical texts. And I've shown many of them on my channel. It is hidden in the architecture and the paintings and the murals of these massive, epic, haunting cathedrals in Gothic architecture. It's everywhere, guys. My channel is full of all these demonstrations, and I'm not done. I told you guys I got 500 videos left in me, and it's always going to be that way. And 500 videos into the future, I promise you guys, I'll have 500 more. The data never stops. I still haven't even unleashed all the stuff that I learned in prison. I got.
Alrighty, so that's happy to leave it there today, guys. That's been a bit of a bit of a dive into the origins of Atlantis, and it not being 9,600 BCE, but being more like 1135 BCE because of things like the dating system and the dating system that they used during that period of time. And yeah, counting, very heavily relying on Plato and 9,000 years ago, and him hearing it from a priest, and not using the moon cycles. So yeah, happy to dive into more of this into the future. And I know that you guys can watch this this on YouTube, but I think that having these foundations and moving through these data sets and building foundations is and understanding our history and knowing ourselves and doing the shadow work and applying this to natural law is the best way to go. So yeah, happy to be here with you guys, and let's keep on learning. And very interesting stuff about the history of Atlantis. It's been a story that's never really sat well with me. I've never really gelled with that story. Have much more connection with the Lemuria story and Mu, but I'm glad that Archaix has gone into the source material and also calling out some of these ancient history people. And Graham Hancock is someone that I've followed quite a number of years. In my time in the Amazon and all that kind of thing. Was there with a friend and trying to get the latest podcast with him in it and all of that. So yeah, I am grateful for him for some of this stuff, and at the same time, I'm also on board with that not being the whole story. So over and out, and we'll see you in the next one. Ciao, bye.